Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tung Nguyen. I'm chair of AAPI Progressive Action, a 501c4 nonprofit aimed at empowering Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders for a strong and diverse America. Former commissioners from President Obama's Advisory Commission on AAPIs created Progressive Action after we had a mass resignation in 2017 following Trump's Muslim travel ban. The Advisory Commission from President Obama actually created a significant capacity to engage and empower AAPI communities. In addition to Progressive Action, the commissioners also created AAPI Victory Fund, which is a super PAC, Leaders Forum, which is a 501c3 nonprofit to engage the business and entrepreneur sector in policy and advocacy at the federal level, and then Act to Change, which is a 501c3 anti-bullying nonprofit led by actor Malik Pancholi, who is on this call today. I want to recognize that Secretary Clinton's organization, Onward Together, was a sponsor of our AAPI Community Action Summit in September 2019 that was held in Orange County, California. The summit trained and mobilized nearly 100 community leaders from around the country with a particular focus on battleground states. Before we introduce today's host, we would greatly appreciate your support to help our community do voter outreach, engagement, and basically take back the country. You can donate to us at aapiprogressiveaction.com. There will also be a link in the chat in case you want to go from there. And then additionally, keep an eye out for our announcement about our selfie video campaign. We would love to see you in our selfie videos, talking about why it matters to be AAPI and engage in political action. So without further ado, I have the honor of introducing today's moderator, Lisa Ling. Lisa is an award-winning journalist and author. She is the host and producer of This Is Life with Lisa Ling on CNN and has been a great supporter of our community throughout her career. Lisa?
Thank you so much, Dr. Nguyen, and thank you all for tuning in. I am thrilled to have been invited to moderate this conversation with someone who needs no introduction. I would like to welcome Secretary Hillary Rodham Clinton to the call. Secretary Clinton, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
I'm delighted to be here, Lisa, and I'm thrilled to support AAPI Progressive Action Fund and the AAPI community in large measure in every way that I can. And so thanks everybody for being on this call.
Well, we have a lot to get to because there's a lot going on in the world, as we all know. But first of all, how are you? How have you been faring the last few months? And how's President Clinton doing?
Well, thank you for that. And you know, we are thankfully all healthy and safe. We are in our home about an hour north of New York City. And it is, you know, a surreal experience, as everybody on this call can attest, not to be going on with our regular normal lives, but I am very grateful that we are beginning to, you know, see some possible plateauing. I hope that it stays that way of the virus. And despite the ineptitude and inconsistency of our federal leadership, a lot of governors and mayors on both sides of the aisle have been very strong in protecting the people that they represent. So as you can imagine, it's a bit maddening for me being on the sidelines and watching what's going on, but I am very, very proud of a lot of the frontline workers and the people who are helping their fellow men, women, and children.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you are doing well, and you've hardly just been on the sidelines. I mean, you haven't been silent about your feelings on how the Trump administration has responded to COVID. But the strategy on their part from the beginning seems to have been to lay blame on China to deflect attention from their slow response. In fact, they've been doubling down on that recently. Do you think that strategy is working?
Well, I think it can work unless people stand up to it, because it is clearly a deflection strategy to try, as you say, to deflect the spotlight from being on the president and his administration. But if you go back, you can see the inconsistency in it, because in the beginning, Trump could not say enough nice things about Xi Jinping and his leadership. And only when he realized that he was going to face the onslaught of the virus here in our own country did he begin to act and try to figure out what should be done. And then when he saw that the numbers kept growing, the deaths kept increasing, he began to do what he always does, which is look for a scapegoat. And there's something we have to keep in mind, and you understand this, Lisa, from your long experience. It's perfectly appropriate to ask hard questions about the Chinese government, about their failure to disclose, about the cover-up in Wuhan, about some of the other behaviors that, truly have been troubling. But it's absolutely unacceptable to morph that into a kind of cry for discrimination against the Chinese people, against Chinese Americans, against Asian Americans, which is really, unfortunately, what has been happening in response to Trump's attacks. We've seen an increase in discrimination, in verbal and physical attacks on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in all kinds of settings. So I think it's incumbent upon all of us, but I would say particularly the AAPI community, and maybe that can be part of the selfie campaign, to point out, for example, that 1 out of 5 healthcare workers in America are Asian American Pacific Islanders, right? So I think we need to get a lot of facts and emotion and rebuttal against the president's effort to turn this campaign into scapegoating not just the Chinese government for poor decisions, but Asian Americans in general.
You're so right. These attacks, the increase in attacks against Asians in this country has frankly, as an Asian person, been really concerning and scary. And when President Trump started referring to the virus as the Chinese virus, the attacks and anti-Asian sentiment started to grow increasingly. What kind of recourse do Asians and Asian Americans have?
Well, I would make a couple of suggestions. I think it is important to be seen and to be heard and to put a human face on this slur that he is making against Chinese people and by extension, Asian people. So for example, being active on social media, being active in local media, conventional local media, reaching out to people to say, look, I can ask questions about the Chinese government, but that should not provide an excuse to scapegoat Asian American citizens, right? And I think that there's a lot that this community and the leadership that is represented on this Zoom call can do and should be doing. I've been impressed by a number of interviews, for example, that I've seen with frontline workers, particularly healthcare workers here in New York. A person of Indian American, Asian, Chinese American, Filipina American, all kinds of people who are getting on the local media and talking about what they're actually doing to help save lives and to fight this virus. So I think there's a lot that we can and should be doing online, on the conventional media, in person, in any way that we can. But it's going to take a campaign. It's going to take the political campaign against Trump to really bring that home. And I look at his campaign, Lisa, and he cannot win if every American eligible to vote takes their vote seriously and shows up.
Well, speaking of, speaking of
get refuted and online and every other way. So we have our work cut out for us.
Yeah, well, voter turnout is going to make the difference. As you know, Asians are the fastest growing demographic in this country, yet voter turnout amongst Asians has been historically low relative to other minority communities. So what are your suggestions for how the community can mobilize in an effort to affect change in politics?
I think it's important for groups like this, AAPI, Progressive Action, allied groups, and others to be starting right now. I mean, everybody has contacts that you can reach out to. Do not underestimate the power of your Twitter feed, your Facebook feed, every other way you're on social media. Begin to build the case now. Talk about why this election is important to every American, but why it has particular significance to the AAPI community. I think a lot of us kind of assume that politics happens at, the macro level, looking at what goes on in the campaign. But what I believe strongly is that in this election, it's going to literally be person by person who you can reach out to in person through social media, literally through your email contact lists and your text numbers, to keep telling people and to take that on as a challenge for yourself. Like, how can I persuade 5 of my friends, 10 of my acquaintances to register to vote, to understand why this time, more than any other time, we have to turn out, and then help them. Tell them where to go to register to vote. You can register online. It can be done really simply. Then you can check online if they actually took your registration. So I think this is going to be labor intensive, but there's no other way to do it. And then the final point is convince people that vote by mail is going to be essential, because a lot of folks are not going to want to leave their homes, especially if there's an upsurge in the virus come the fall. And they have to be convinced that vote by mail is safe. It's what's done completely in places like Oregon and Utah and Colorado. So it's something we really need to be pushing this time too.
Absolutely. Now, Secretary, only 76% of AAPI businesses received PPP funds. What should Congress and the next administration do to fix this? We're not sure if many of these businesses will even survive.
Yeah. I am really worried about small and medium-sized businesses not surviving. I'm also worried about businesses surviving, but at a much lower level of functioning, so they can't bring back all their employees. They can't really, be as pronounced and important in their communities. So I think at both the local, state, and the federal level, we need to be coming up with an agenda to support those businesses. And there's lots of things to look at, like our rents and mortgages, something that should be, postponed, even decreased or diminished in some way, so that businesses can start up again and maybe push their financial obligations far into the future. Should we be helping to compensate and subsidize the return of employees so that businesses can afford to employ for a period of time? Let's look at practical solutions. And the solution in Seattle may be different than San Francisco or New York or Chicago. So I think that one of the real important contributions that can be made by AAPI, Progressive Action, but other allied groups, is to come up with real world solutions so that any business that could survive is given a fighting chance to survive.
The reality is that there will be many, many businesses that won't survive. And healthcare for the majority of Americans is tied to employment. And given that almost 40 million Americans have filed for unemployment and have lost their healthcare, has that made you think differently about how healthcare should be provided?
No, it's made me just be more determined. I've been trying to break the link between employment and healthcare for now, I guess, 25, 30 years, because it's the wrong way to provide healthcare. And first of all, we have to save the Affordable Care Act. There is no substitute right now. We need to lower the Medicare age so that people starting at 60 and then 55 are eligible. We need to take a lot of steps right now to demonstrate to voters and to people who've lost their health care that the Trump administration wants to take it all away. They want to, and they're on record, of ending the Affordable Care Act, of not funding the Children's Health Insurance Program, of cutting Medicare and Medicaid dramatically, cutting Social Security. You know, people who may not yet be focused because of their own immediate problems on what this election means need to be told that if they're struggling with health care now, a unfortunate second term of this president would leave them totally without any kind of recourse. And, you know, when Trump ran and said, oh, I'm going to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, I'm going to give you something even better, he has never produced a plan. His only plan is to destroy the Affordable Care Act. And so we have a lot of work we can do. And eventually we need universal health care. We need everybody to be covered as a matter of right, regardless of employment status. And there are several good ways of getting there. And so I'm going to continue to advocate for universal health care that's quality care and affordable care for everybody.
Secretary Clinton, I want to ask you about this division in this country. A few people have experienced the viciousness of this partisan divide in this country more than you. We have collectively just reached this low bar, which obviously starts from the top down. Do you think this is just our normal now? And can we emerge from this?
Oh, Lisa, I hope and pray it's not our normal. Because as bad as it has been, it's getting even more vicious. The kinds of things that people say online, they would never say to your face, but they reach tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people. We have a president who engages in just the most pernicious, terrible falsehoods online, accusing people of the most outrageous accusations without even pretending that they are based on facts or evidence. We are moving into an era where technology can be used to put words in your mouth or mine so that it sounds like you're saying something you've never said, all for partisan advantage. And it is deeply distressing to me, but it's very bad for our democracy as well. I think we've got to do more to regulate the online platforms that are not doing a good job in making sure that people are held to some standard of accountability. Finally, they intervened because of all the lies about COVID-19, but they have never intervened about all the lies about vaccination. And now they're letting the president lie about some things and trying to say he's lying about other things. It's just not workable for a democracy. How's the average person supposed to know? That feeds this viciousness and divisiveness. And it also plays into those who are seeking power at any cost. So I think three things. One, we need to do more to hold the platforms, the online platforms, accountable. We need to understand that artificial intelligence can do some good things, but it also can further undermine our sense of reality, a fact-based, universe, and certainly what to believe and not to believe in a democracy. Secondly, I think we all have to do a better job of speaking out and trying to rebut and refute while the platforms won't, because it's our only hope of trying to demonstrate to people what is true and what is not true. And I think we have to win elections because, you hear Joe Biden saying he'd love to get back to people working together. So would I. But Mitch McConnell has no interest in working together. He wants to wield power at whatever cost. So the only way to try to begin to move it back toward what we would hope would be the normal is to win the White House, win the Senate, and keep the House, and then try to also win up and down the ballot. It is, unfortunately, I think the only chance we've got to trying to retain or regain some sense of balance again in our politics.
Thank you for that. I want to get back to the pandemic. And by the way, I think earlier I said that 76% of Asian-owned businesses receive PPP funds. They did not receive PPP funds. I want to just make that clear because I misspoke. But back to the pandemic, it's really magnified the egregious social inequities that have always existed in this country, but how do we address those communities most affected so they won't suffer the kind of blow they've experienced this time around if and when the virus comes back in the fall?
Well, this is something that everybody at federal, state, and local levels in government, in the not-for-profit sector, I would even argue in the private sector, should be focused on. We clearly have got to do something about universal coverage for everybody. That's number one. Number two, though, we've got to make sure that access is real. You know, you can have healthcare coverage under Medicare, Medicaid, the Affordable Care Act, or a new system that we should be looking to design. But if you don't have access because it's hard to get to your healthcare providers or there's other obstacles in your way, we need more community health centers like the one that I know of in Oakland that serves the AAPI community. We need more easily accessed primary care, physicians, physician assistants, nurses, midwives. We've got to flood the zone so that people can not only have access, but access that works for them. You know, if you can't go to somebody who understands your language, that's a barrier. If you can't go to somebody because the hours that they're available are when you have to work to support your family, that's a barrier. I mean, we need to look at every single barrier to care and try to dismantle them all so that people at least have a fighting chance to be as healthy as possible. We need to do a much better job on nutrition. And to make sure there aren't food deserts in our country so that people don't have the chance to pick the right kind of foods. We need better nutrition education in schools, online, and elsewhere so people know what good choices are. There's a lot we should be doing to make sure that people have access to the kind of quality, affordable healthcare they deserve.
Absolutely. Secretary, I want to go back to the Chinese government. We talked about this when we started this conversation. You know, it has a lot of answering to do about a myriad of things, particularly their handling of the crisis in the early days. But what role do you see the Chinese government having in this upcoming election?
Well, let me say this. Part of the role of diplomacy and leadership is to do more than one thing at a time. And I think we should be, for example, working with the Chinese scientists and researchers who have been on the forefront of trying to figure out where viruses are going to come from next, and also looking to try to create a vaccine. So when I was Secretary of State, I would have difficult conversations with the Chinese government about a number of issues. And then I would have cooperative conversations about how we could be working together and finding ways to cooperate. Unfortunately, given the current administration, they are tunnel vision, and it is all about what's good for Donald Trump's political fortunes. And so they pick a theme like, let's jump on the Chinese government and the China writ large to help us in our election. That's not the way a leader is supposed to behave. You can be calling for investigations, and I was glad the World Health Organization has decided to try to get to the bottom of what the Chinese government knew and when they knew it, so it doesn't happen again. We can't rewrite history, but we also need to know more about what happened and when and what could be done better. But we also need to be looking for ways to cooperate on this virus. We need to be sending a strong message about human rights to the Chinese government. We need to be saying, you made a deal about Hong Kong that you are trying to breach. That is not acceptable. There are ways of doing both the sort of good guy, bad guy routine in diplomacy, and there are things to criticize and be worried about when it comes to the Chinese government and their recent actions. But there are areas where we should be and need to be cooperating, particularly when it comes to global public health.
And how would you advise the Biden campaign on how it should respond to the Chinese government? I mean, about a month ago, the Biden campaign aired an ad that it depicted images of Trump sort of cozying up to Chinese officials, and it wasn't received very well. What would you suggest to the campaign in how to deal with the Chinese government, but not alienate or invite attacks on Asians in this country?
Well, I think that the Biden government, I hope, the Biden campaign ought to be pointing out the inconsistencies of Trump and making it clear that what he's doing, he's not doing because he really cares about what happens to the COVID patients. He's demonstrated time and time again that, he wants to, do what he believes will help him politically, not listen to the scientists. So just use his own words. He went from praising Xi Jinping and praising China's response to now trying to scapegoat China to hide his own failures. That's what I would be emphasizing. This has nothing to do with anything of conviction for him. This is trying to scapegoat China and by extension, Chinese people in order to hide his own failures. So let's not let him get away with that. And then I think that the Biden campaign can say, look, as Joe Biden has a right to claim, he was vice president for 8 years. He was in the Senate. He knows foreign relations. He's going to adopt the right balanced approach toward the Chinese government. And he's going to be, looking for areas that we should be cooperating on, but calling them out on human rights and other areas when it's something that really matters. So I think that that's the kind of, positioning that the Biden campaign should take. And, all you have to do is go from praising Xi Jinping to telling people to drink bleach, to demonstrate that this guy is looking for somebody to blame because he has so tragically mishandled our own government's response to what's happening here to our people when it comes to the virus.
Secretary, we don't have much longer, and a lot of questions are coming in from people who are watching, so I wanted to ask you a couple of them. John Park asks, I am Korean American living in Flushing, Queens, one of the hardest hit communities in the world under COVID. Given this situation, how can we as Asian Americans, immigrants, small business owners best help Joe Biden and Democrats win in November?
Well, I know John Park. He's a friend of mine. He's been a big supporter of mine. He stood up for me and campaigned for me in Flushing and throughout New York. So hello, John. I think do what you do best, John. Reach out to your community. Make sure they understand what's at stake in this election. Get everybody you can registered to vote in New York. Ask the people you work with to reach beyond Flushing into other parts of not just New York, but other parts of our country, particularly the so-called swing states like Pennsylvania, where you have friends and contacts, or North Carolina, or Michigan, Wisconsin, and really do what you do so well, John, which is to make the case why this election is critically important to Americans and to the Korean American and the larger AAPI community.
Corinne is asking, how can we effectively campaign when we can't leave our homes, when we're still under isolation, so to speak?
Use social media and use it as much as you can. Use your Facebook pages to explain to people why you're supporting Joe Biden, why you're supporting Democrats, why it would make a difference. Talk about the real problems that our country will face or your community will face if we don't change the White House and change the Senate, as well as other offices up and down the ballot. Use social media. I mean, communicate with as many people as you can. Obviously, good old-fashioned telephones. More people are actually using their phones today than they have in the past. Use this time to write letters. Some people are actually sending postcards. There's some primary elections still coming up in the rest of June and the rest of the summer. So there are lots of ways to reach out, and we at Onward Together can give you some more ideas about how to support organizations that are actually organizing and working through this quarantine period remotely, virtually, so you can know what best can be done.
I have a question from Philip Poon. Asian Americans occupy a confused place in American racial hierarchies, neither Black or white, simultaneously the highest earning racial group and also the poorest, multi-generational, but also new immigrants, etc. Can you comment on this?
Well, I think that what you've said is right, Philip, that it's quite a comprehensive picture of what America is and what the American dream is, because just as you say, AAPI community members are the highest earning Americans and also the poorest. So there has to be a way of better telling that story. You know, earlier I said, for example, 1 out of 5 frontline healthcare workers is AAPI. I'm not sure every American knows that. I'm not even sure every AAPI American knows that. So we've got to help tell your story, but you've got to tell it, because your story, whatever it might be, your origin story, whether you are a new immigrant or you've been here for 6 generations or more, tell that story. I mean, part of what we see Trump doing is dividing us and trying to draw a line between, quote, real Americans and unreal Americans. And of course, only real Americans are worth listening to, and they're the ones who he is counting on to reelect him. We can't let him get away with that. We are all real Americans. We all have different stories and backgrounds and contributions and struggles, and we need to make sure your stories are told. So, maybe AAPI Progressive Action can do some short videos, some not just selfies, but real videos of people telling their stories. I was saying earlier that I've been very touched by interviews on local television here in New York during the height of this terrible pandemic, interviewing nurses from the Philippines, doctors who are Chinese Americans, hospital administrators who are Indian Americans or Japanese Americans. I have loved seeing that, and I've loved having the knowledge that millions of people are seeing these frontline Asian American Pacific Islanders. So tell the story. Be proud of the story. You are America's story. You are America's dream. Don't let any kind of cheap shots and scapegoating from the current president undermine that conviction that you have. And so tell the story so every American can hear it.
Wise words, Secretary. This next question is one that's that is being asked by a number of people, so I'm just going to kind of combine it. Who do you want to see on the ticket with Joe Biden?
I want to see whoever Joe Biden thinks meets what I believe are the 3 criterion. Okay, and this is how I thought about it when I was making my choice back in 2016. Number 1, can this person immediately become president? Is this person ready to assume what is and should be the awesome responsibility of being president? Number 2, is this somebody you want to work closely with for 4 years? Have lunch with, be in meetings with from early in the morning to late at night. And I've seen that up close in several administrations. And finally, can this person help you win? And let's remember what winning means. Winning doesn't mean, as I can sadly attest, winning the popular vote by more than anybody ever has, other than one of Obama's terms. I've gotten the 2nd highest vote in American history, but I'm not in the White House today. I'm at home in New York. Can this person help you win the Electoral College? Can this person help you win these swing states that are going to be, once again, at the core of how we defeat Donald Trump? So those are the 3 criteria. And I think that's what Joe Biden should be thinking about. And obviously, I will support whatever choice he makes, but I hope that the person that he chooses is able to fit all 3 of those categories.
Does that mean you're not going to give us any names, any favorites?
No, not going to. That's a personal, difficult choice. I'm not going to interfere in it.
Secretary Hillary Rodham Clinton, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us and offering such wise pieces of information for us and food for thought to think about. On behalf of AAPI Progressive Action, I want to thank you all for joining. And if you want to find out more information about the organization, please go to aapiprogressiveaction.com. And yeah, thank you all so much for being here today. Have a great day.
Thank you, Lisa. Everybody stay safe and healthy.
Thank you.